What's up? I'm travel photographer Brendan Vanson of brendansadventures.com, and on this episode I'm going to be comparing the Canon 7D Mark II to the Canon 6D. So this is a video I've been promising you for a while and I've been meaning to do for a while. I've had my Canon 6D for about 3 months and I absolutely love it. On the other hand, Tiffany's had her 7D Mark II for a little over a month, and likewise she absolutely loves her camera. Now, doing a comparison between the 7D Mark II and the 6D might seem a little bit silly since they really aren't that comparable cameras. The 6D is a full frame camera meant for landscape, nature, and maybe architecture photography, whereas the 7D Mark II is a fast shooting crop sensor camera meant for wildlife and sports photography and things like that. But as travel photographers, we often do have to make decisions since we are shooting so many different things. We could be shooting wildlife, nature, landscapes, people, sports, all within a week. So sometimes we have to make compromises. And the one thing that is comparable between the 6D and the 7D Mark II is the price point. They both come in right around $1,700 to $1,800. So let's discuss them. So let's start on the outside and work our way into the camera, and we'll talk about build to start. The 7D Mark II is an absolute beast. I mean, this thing is built like a tank. They say it's 5 times more weather sealed than the 7D Mark I, and personally I'm not a big fan of the fact that they say that to begin with, because in my opinion weather sealing should be weather sealed. There shouldn't be levels of weather sealing. It shouldn't be an ambiguous term. It shouldn't be vague. Your camera's either weather sealed or it isn't. So the 7D Mark II is very weather sealed and it is very weather resistant. As we've already noticed in the field, it handles shooting in snow or rain or anything like that really well without any issues. And as a matter of trust, it's really great to be able to be out shooting in a snowstorm or rain a little bit and not have to worry about your camera crapping out on you. So that's fantastic. The one thing I do have to say about the weather sealing with the 7D Mark II is you have to make sure you're matching it up with a weather sealed lens. If you're not doing that, then the weather seal for the camera sensor is gone. You don't have that weather sealing in here. So if you're putting on a good lens, an L series lens like that onto the 7D Mark II, you're not gonna have a problem. Looking now at the build of the 6D, it's kind of funny because they're completely different, these two cameras. The 6D is also weather sealed though, but it is built for speed, if you will. It's very lightweight. It does have the magnesium alloy, but it is mixed in with a little bit of plastic, and it is extremely light. The 7D Mark II comes in at like about 800 grams, and this one comes in about 150 grams lighter. So way lighter. Personally, I prefer the lightweight feel to it. That's just how I am. But that's up to you. If you prefer a sturdier camera, the 7D Mark II is definitely sturdier. Next, let's talk about the sensor quality. The 7D Mark II does have a fantastic sensor for a crop sensor. In fact, what a lot of the wildlife enthusiasts and sports photographers were really looking for when this came out wasn't new features or anything like that. It was how good is this going to be able to handle ISO up to 1600, 3200, things like that. And from our tests out in Whistler, we found that up to 1600, it's fantastic. Even up to 3200, you can get usable images, which is great for a crop sensor. In fact, I might even go as far as saying that this is the best crop sensor camera I've ever seen in handling noise. It is absolutely fantastic. My old 60D, which was also a crop sensor, does not do well with noise at all. I'd be scared shooting ISO, 640 or higher. I could go maybe ISO 800 if I was getting a little bit crazy, but 1600 was already basically unusable. The 7D Mark II is a huge advancement in that regard. The 6D, its sensor is fantastic, and it's the #1 reason I went with the 6D over something like the 7D Mark II or another crop sensor. Is I wanted the full frame sensor, I wanted the high resolution, I wanted the noise handling capability to allow me to do things like shoot higher ISO portraits, to shoot better star photography and things like that. So that was the major selling point, and from what I've seen so far, it is unreal. I've been able to shoot things like the sports in Whistler at ISO 3200, still getting really clean images. Up to 6400, well, I was still getting a little bit of noise, but it was still definitely usable. Anything higher than that, it was starting to get a little bit ugly, a little bit of artifacts creeping in, but really, when do you go much higher than 6400 ISO anyway? Now the next thing on my list is the autofocus, and that was one of my huge disappointments with the 6D. The 6D only has one cross type autofocus right in the center, and I could see that being a problem already in Whistler. A lot of the time I was framing my images of snowboarders and skiers with the subject right in the middle of the frame, because that was the only autofocus point I could trust. And with moving subjects, you don't really have the time to focus and then reframe, focus and reframe. You just got to shoot. So that is an issue. The one advantage I found to the 6D's autofocus that people don't talk about is in the low light, its autofocusing capabilities are phenomenal. Low light quality autofocusing has never been easy for anyone, and landscape photographers will love this. In certain situations out in the field, I was able to just throw on the autofocus button and shoot. Whereas in the past, I'd like to lock in, look at live view, zoom in to 10 times, just to make sure everything was okay, and then fine tune it. With the 6D, I haven't had to do that. It's been locked on almost the entire time. It's phenomenal. Even in the sports settings, when it was really dark at the Fire and Ice show in Whistler, I was able to lock on to the skiers and snowboarders in the dark much faster than on the 7D Mark II. That being said, the autofocus for the 7D Mark II is phenomenal, and one of the big selling points of this, you've got 65 cross-type autofocus points on the 7D Mark II, and they're scattered out all over the viewfinder. So you'll have no problem reframing or anything like that, because you'll be able to choose an autofocus point that's exactly in the composition that you want, and that's phenomenal. There's also some really good autofocus modes that allow you a lot of control or very little control of where you want the autofocus to go. And it is very smart technology as well, is what we found. The one downside that I did see was in the low light situation, it was having a little bit harder time grasping the autofocus than the 6D, but still way better, a huge improvement over the 6DD. So let's talk about that sweet, sweet shutter sound of the camera. And it's again something that really sold the 7D Mark II to a lot of people. Those 10 frames per second that this camera shoots is unreal. And really the highest frame rate you can get on the Canon chain, other than that 1DX, which is like $6,400 plus, depending where you buy it. So for $1,800, getting 10 frames a second is fantastic. And that, coupled with the autofocus points, really means that you don't miss anything. When we were out shooting in Whistler, when Tiffany was pulling scenes on the rails or with the skiers jumping, not only was she getting those 10 frames per second, really cool sequence images, but they were all sharp. And that is unreal. That's something that I really felt was an issue with my 6D. Again, I was focusing right in the middle of the frame, but at 4.5 frames a second that you can get on the 6D, I felt like I was missing things in the sequence. And there was a couple times that there was like a perfect moment that Tiffany got on her 7D Mark II that I missed on the 6D. So again, that's something that you've got to decide for yourself. You've got to choose what's most important to you. Are you going to be shooting a lot of wildlife? Or are you going to be shooting a lot of sports? If you are, you probably might want to think about the 7D Mark II. If you're not, and it's just an occasional thing, the 6D will definitely get you by. Also related to the shutters, I'll tell you that the 6D has a very, very quiet shutter sound. When you shoot this thing, it really doesn't make much sound at all, which is great for nature because you really don't disturb it. So if I was to shoot this, I'll hold this next to my lapel. You can hear that it's very muted and muffled, like a pillowy sound. The 7D Mark II also has a really muted shutter compared to a lot of the other crop sensors, which sound like, as I've mentioned before, a beaver slapping down on the water. But it is quiet, not as quiet as the 6D, and it has a bit more of a mechanical sound. So again, I'll hold it close to my lapel. First, I've got to turn it on. That helps. So you can hear it's got that mechanical sound. So it's personal preference. Neither are loud. And I think the 7D sounds pretty cool. It sounds pretty badass. But they're both pretty good when it comes to that test. So you might also want to be thinking about the extras that are involved in the back end of each camera. And both have significant upgrades over cameras of even a year ago. The 6D has built-in Wi-Fi, and that's something I thought I was going to be using a lot, and I haven't even used once so far. Now, the thing about Wi-Fi that I thought I was going to be using, I thought I'd be able to take an image directly off of here and then shoot it over to my smartphone and then post it up to Instagram or Twitter or whatever. I just haven't done that, and that's partly because I'm in the States right now and I'm always close to Wi-Fi. I'm always close to my laptop and I can always update and upload and do a true edit on the image. So it's something I haven't done yet that I thought I was going to do a little bit more. So it's a feature that's kind of gone amiss on me. A feature that hasn't gone amiss on me is the GPS. The GPS tech in this camera has been amazing and I absolutely love it. The GPS is turned on all the time though, which can be a little bit of an issue if you don't forget to turn the internal GPS off. Because even if I turn the camera off and I set it in my room for 2 or 3 days, my battery might die, because even when the camera's off, the GPS is still running, and I found that a bit of a pain in the ass. I wish there was an update to the firmware or something like that in which Canon could find a way to block that off, but at the moment I've really had to go into the GPS and turn it off every single time I'm done shooting, and on a couple occasions I've forgot to turn it back on or I've forgotten to take it off. So that's an issue, but the GPS function is awesome and I absolutely love that. The 7D Mark II also has GPS function. You can see the GPS is right up top. It is the same issue that the 6D does with not turning off. There isn't Wi-Fi in the 7D Mark II, and some people might have liked to see that Wi-Fi, but after having the Wi-Fi and realizing that you don't need it, I'm not really hurt by that fact at all. And the truth is, you can always just get one of those Wi-Fi or those iFi Wi-Fi cards and plug it in here and get the exact same functionality as having Wi-Fi built directly into your camera anyway. A feature that's involved in the 7D Mark II that I absolutely love is the built-in intervalometer. I think that's fantastic. I think it's a really easy thing for Canon to put into their cameras, and they really should be putting it into all of their cameras. So having a built-in intervalometer allows you to shoot time-lapse or star-lapse or anything you want really directly in the camera without having to buy one of those $130, $150 triggers or a trigger trap or adding magic lantern to your camera or something like that. I wish they would have put an intervalometer into the 6D as well. So let's talk about value a little bit, because both of these cameras do offer a ton of value. They're in that price range of $1,700 to $1,800, and there's not a lot of competition in that area that has as many positives as these two cameras. But with each camera, when it comes to value, you also have to remove something to get that value. With the 7D Mark II, the only thing I think that they removed in terms of value is that full frame sensor. That's the truth. The 7D Mark II has all the bells and whistles of the 1DX, Canon's top of the line camera with a crop sensor inside it. You've got 10 frames per second, you've got 65 autofocus points, you've got internal GPS, you've got an intervalometer, you've got all the bells and whistles. It is a fantastic camera, and so if you're willing to shoot a camera that has a crop sensor in it because you don't need high ISO like above 1600, 3200, the 7D is a perfect camera, and the value is A+. I mean, it does not get better than that for value. Likewise, the 6D has a ton of value. It's one of the cheapest full frame cameras on the market, and it's got a beautiful sensor that pulls beautiful images as well. The downside to the value of the Canon 6D is big though, in my opinion, and it's something that I wish they would have addressed. I wish they would have put a better autofocus system in it. Even if that autofocus system was, say, 11 to 25 autofocus points that were cross-type autofocus points, I would have been willing to spend another $400 on this body. At the moment, the 6D is a little bit limited. If you're a landscape photographer, if you are a nature photographer, if you're a still life photographer, macro photographer, architecture, it's beautiful for you. But as soon as you have to start capturing moving subjects, it's a pain and a challenge to shoot. And personally, like I said, I'd be really willing to spend an extra $400 to have that better autofocus system within the 6D. And I'm thinking that there's going to be a 6D Mark II coming out in the next 6 months or so, and I'm really hoping they address that problem. So those are my thoughts on the Canon 7D Mark II and the Canon 6D Mark I. And I hope you liked the show. I hope this has helped you decide between the 7D Mark II and the 6D, which again aren't really comparable cameras, but when you're in travel photography and you don't have a lot of money like I don't, you have to decide, you have to make compromises. So I hope this helped you figure out which compromises you want to make and which camera body you want to pick up for your next big gear purchase. Anyways, that's it for the show today. I want to urge you to subscribe to the channel. We're off on a big US road trip coming up. So the next couple of episodes are going to be from some really cool places. We're going to Havasu Falls and the Havasu Canyon. And then after that, we're going to White Sands, New Mexico, Guadalupe Mountains National Forest Park, Austin, Texas, New Orleans, Miami. It's going to be crazy and it's going to be awesome. So be sure to stay tuned to that. I'll catch you next time. Peace.